Rain hammered the alley behind the market so hard that the world seemed to blur at the edges. Water cascaded from rusted fire escapes and overflowing gutters, splashing into puddles thick with oil and dirt. The city beyond was alive with noise, honking cars, distant sirens, hurried footsteps, but none of it seemed to reach the small figure curled beside the dumpster. She sat with her knees pressed tightly against her chest, shivering beneath clothes so worn they barely protected her from the cold. Mud stained her sleeves. A bruise darkened one cheek. Her tangled hair hung over her face like a curtain, hiding her from anyone who might look her way. Not that anyone ever did. People passed the alley entrance every few seconds. Some glanced in. Most didn't. A few noticed her and immediately looked away. She had become accustomed to that. Invisible. Unwanted. Easy to ignore. The rain soaked through her clothes until she could no longer tell the difference between raindrops and tears. Her stomach ached from hunger. Her body ached from exhaustion. But neither hurt as much as the voice inside her head. The voice that sounded suspiciously like all the others. You're a burden. You're pathetic. You're worthless. Nobody wants you. The words echoed endlessly. She squeezed her eyes shut. Maybe if she stayed still enough, the world would forget she existed completely. Maybe that would be easier. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Approaching. Her heart immediately lurched into panic. Most people avoided the alley. Anyone walking into it usually meant trouble. The footsteps stopped. Close. Too close. She dared to lift her head. A man stood several feet away. Rain dripped from the hood of his dark coat. He wasn't young. Wasn't old either. Just ordinary. The kind of face you might forget 5 minutes after seeing it. Yet something about him felt different. He wasn't staring at her with annoyance. Or disgust. Or suspicion. He was simply looking at her. Actually looking. As if she existed. The realization made her uncomfortable. She quickly lowered her gaze. Please. She whispered. The man remained silent. Please don't come closer. His voice, when it finally came, was calm. Why? The question caught her off guard. Nobody ever asked why. People usually just walked away. Or insulted her. Or pretended she wasn't there. She swallowed hard. Because. Her voice trembled. Because I'm filthy. Rainwater dripped from her hair. She rubbed at the mud covering her hands. I'm dirty. The man didn't move. I'm sure you've been in worse weather than I have. She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, tears gathered in her eyes. You don't understand. Then help me understand. The kindness in his tone felt dangerous. Cruel, almost. Because kindness created hope. And hope had a habit of dying. She stared at the puddle beneath her. Distorted reflections rippled across its surface. I smell bad. The confession escaped before she could stop it. I haven't had a real shower in weeks. Silence. I haven't eaten properly. Silence. My clothes are ruined. Still silence. She clenched her fists. Why wasn't he leaving? Why wasn't he reacting? Why wasn't he looking disgusted? Finally she looked up. Say something. The man tilted his head slightly. Like what? Her frustration erupted. Like everyone else does. The words echoed through the alley. Her breathing quickened. You can tell me I'm disgusting. Nothing. You can tell me I did this to myself. Nothing. You can tell me I deserve it. Still nothing. The stranger simply stood there, listening. The tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over. I know what people think when they see me. Her voice cracked. I know. The man slowly crouched down so he was closer to eye level. Not too close. Just enough. What do they think? The question felt like a knife. Because she knew the answer. She had heard it enough times. That I'm trash. Her chest tightened. That I'm broken. A sob escaped. That I'm useless. The words grew louder. That I'm shameful. Now she couldn't stop. The dam had burst. That if I disappeared tonight, nobody would care. Thunder rumbled overhead. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The rain continued pouring around them. Finally the man asked quietly. Who told you that? Her entire body froze. The question hit harder than she expected. Faces immediately flooded her memory. Too many faces. A father who left. A mother too exhausted to fight for her. Teachers who gave up. Friends who disappeared. Employers who treated her like she was replaceable. Strangers who judged without knowing anything. People who looked at her pain and saw weakness. People who looked at her failures and decided they defined her. People who made sure she knew exactly how little she mattered. The answer lodged in her throat. Everyone. The man nodded slowly. Then he asked something unexpected. Were they all right? She blinked. What? Were they all right? The simplicity of the question stunned her. Nobody had ever challenged the verdict. Nobody had ever suggested those voices might be wrong. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I don't know. The admission felt strange. Foreign. The man studied her face. You believe them? Of course I do. Why? Her frustration flared again. Because look at me. She spread her arms. Rainwater splashed from her sleeves. Look where I am. Her voice rose. I have nothing. The words tore from her chest. No home. No family. No future. The pain she'd carried for years surged to the surface. So tell me what I'm supposed to think. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly removed his coat. The motion startled her. Before she understood what he was doing, he draped it around her shoulders. Warmth surrounded her instantly. She froze. The coat was dry inside. Heavy. Comfortable. Human. The scent of soap lingered faintly on the fabric. She stared at him. What are you doing? You're cold. The simplicity nearly broke her. Her fingers gripped the coat. You shouldn't have done that. Why not? Because it'll get dirty. The words escaped automatically. The man looked down at the mud. Then back at her. It's a coat. No. Fresh tears filled her eyes. You don't understand. His expression softened. Help me understand. Her voice became barely audible. Everything I touch gets ruined. The confession hung in the air. Raw. Painful. True, or at least true according to the story she'd been telling herself for years. The man considered her words. Then shook his head. No. Her eyes narrowed. No? No. His answer carried certainty. The kind she no longer possessed. She laughed bitterly. You don't know anything about me. Maybe not. Then how can you say that? The man's gaze never wavered. Because ruined things don't cry over becoming better. The words landed somewhere deep inside her. A place she hadn't visited in years. She looked away quickly. The alley suddenly felt too small. Too quiet. Too exposed. What if you're wrong? The question emerged as a whisper. What if everyone else is right? The man was silent for several seconds. Then he asked. Do you know what I see? She almost said no. But the answer caught in her throat. Because she wanted to know. Against all logic, she wanted to know. What? The man leaned forward slightly. I see someone who's exhausted. She blinked. I see someone who's hungry. Her chest tightened. I see someone who's been hurt. The tears returned. I see someone carrying enough shame for 10 lifetimes. Now she couldn't breathe properly. But he wasn't finished. And I see someone who's still here. She frowned. What does that mean? The man's eyes softened. It means you've survived every terrible day that tried to destroy you. The alley seemed to disappear. The rain faded into the background. For the first time in years, someone wasn't talking about her failures. Someone was talking about her survival. The difference was enormous. Her lips trembled. You make it sound heroic. Maybe it is. She immediately shook her head. No. Why not? Because surviving isn't special. The man's answer came instantly. To someone who's never had to fight for it, maybe. The words settled heavily between them. She stared at him. Something inside her was changing. Not healing. Not yet. But shifting. Like ice beginning to crack after a long winter. The sensation terrified her. Because pain was familiar. Shame was familiar. Hope wasn't. Hope was dangerous. Hope could leave. Hope could betray. Hope could die. The man slowly reached toward her. Not suddenly. Not forcefully. Giving her every opportunity to pull away. Her muscles tensed. Years of fear screamed at her to retreat. Yet somehow she remained still. His hand gently lifted her chin. She expected pity. Expected sympathy. Expected the look people reserved for lost causes. Instead she found something else. Respect. The realization stunned her. He wasn't looking down at her. He wasn't seeing a failure. He wasn't seeing a problem. He was seeing a person. A human being. Equal. Valuable. Real. The tears began falling faster. Why? She whispered. The man's brow furrowed. Why what? Why are you looking at me like that? His answer came without hesitation. Because that's how you deserve to be seen. The words shattered whatever remained of her defenses. A sob erupted from deep inside her chest. Then another. Then another. Years of grief poured out all at once. Every insult. Every rejection. Every lonely night. Every moment she'd convinced herself she wasn't enough. It all surfaced. Raw and overwhelming. She bent forward, trembling violently. The man moved closer. For a brief second fear flickered through her. Then his arms wrapped around her. Warm. Steady. Safe. She gasped. Nobody had hugged her in years. Not a real hug. Not one without conditions. Not one without judgment. Just simple human warmth. The sensation overwhelmed her. She buried her face against his shoulder. The tears came harder than ever. Her entire body shook. Yet the man didn't let go. The rain continued pouring. Water splashed around them. Cars passed in the distance. The city carried on. But inside that alley, time seemed to stop. She cried until her throat hurt. Until her chest ached. Until she had nothing left. And still the stranger remained there. Holding her. Not because she had earned it. Not because she was useful. Not because she was successful. Simply because she was human. Eventually the sobs began to fade. Her breathing slowed. The trembling eased. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something unfamiliar. Not happiness. Not yet. But relief. The relief of putting down a burden she had carried alone for far too long. She slowly pulled back. The man released her immediately. No pressure. No expectations. Just kindness. She wiped her eyes. The rain had softened now. Falling in gentle sheets instead of violent waves. The city lights reflected across wet pavement. Everything looked different somehow. Not because the world had changed. Because she had. Only slightly. Only enough to notice one terrifying possibility. Maybe the voices had lied. Maybe she wasn't what they said. Maybe she was more than her worst moments. More than her mistakes. More than her scars. The thought frightened her almost as much as it comforted her. The man stood and extended his hand. She stared at it. A simple gesture. Yet it felt monumental. An invitation. A choice. Remain where she was. Or try. Just try. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. When their hands met, he smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not a victorious one. Just a quiet smile. The kind people wear when they find something precious they thought was lost. And as he helped her stand beneath the fading storm, a realization settled deep within her heart. The miracle wasn't that someone finally saw value in her. The miracle was that, for the very first time, she was beginning to see it too.